On Air, Deep Dive Podcast Brazil.
All right, get ready to dive into some seriously murky waters today.
Ooh, sounds intense.
We're talking Brazilian politics.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, we're going to take a deep dive into an alternative perspective on former President Jair Bolsonaro.
A perspective you might not find in your usual news sources.
Exactly. We're talking Brazilian politics remixed.
I like it.
So the material we dug into really challenges that mainstream narrative of Bolsonaro as like a would-be coup leader.
It does, yeah.
Definitely piqued my interest. So let's break it down.
Okay, so basically the source we're looking at kind of meticulously dismantles that whole idea of a Bolsonaro-led coup.
Okay.
And they argue that he lacked all four.
All four.
Yeah, all four of the classic elements you'd need to actually pull off a coup.
Oh, interesting.
So historically, coups involve like securing the military, controlling the media, taking over important institutions,
Right.
and sometimes even like mobilizing popular support
Gotcha.
to meet people on the streets. And this source is claiming that Bolsonaro didn't really tick any of those boxes.
So no military, no media, no institutions.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's start with the military then.
Okay, sure.
Because, I mean, Bolsonaro did have those close ties to the military, right?
He did.
So was there any indication that they were ready to back him up if he made a move?
Well, that's what's interesting.
Yeah.
The source points out that despite those ties, there's absolutely no evidence that they'd explicitly support a coup. And in fact, the armed forces actually came out publicly
Oh, wow.
on multiple occasions
Really?
and reaffirmed their commitment to the Constitution.
Wow, so no military muscle then.
Nope.
Okay, what about the media? Because didn't Bolsonaro have a pretty strong base of support? Didn't he kind of control the narrative in some ways?
That's the common perception.
Yep.
But this source claims that major media outlets were actually often quite critical of Bolsonaro.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they pushed back against his policies pretty hard.
Interesting. So it wasn't like a total media blackout or anything.
Not at all.
Okay, so that's two strikes against the coup narrative.
Right.
No military, no media control.
Yeah.
But what about institutional control?
Yeah.
Surely a sitting president has some leverage there, right?
That's where it gets really interesting because the source claims that key institutions like the Supreme Federal Court,
Okay.
or STF for short,
Yeah.
and the Superior Electoral Court, the TSE,
Right.
they actually acted as roadblocks for Bolsonaro's government.
Hold on. So instead of like grasping for more control, he was actually facing pushback.
That's exactly what they're saying.
That's wild.
Yeah, pretty bold claim.
And wait,
Yeah.
if he's a democratically elected president,
Uh-huh.
why would he stage a coup against himself?
Right.
That doesn't even make sense.
Logistically, politically, just doesn't add up.
It's a head scratcher for sure.
It is.
So if Bolsonaro wasn't plotting a coup, then who was?
Well, the source actually points fingers at...
Certain factions within both the right wing and the judiciary.
Oh, interesting.
They're not letting anybody off the hook.
So even within Bolsonaro's own camp, there were people working against him.
Potentially, yeah.
Wow, that adds a whole other layer to this.
Definitely does.
So what about the judiciary then? What exactly are they being accused of?
Well, the source claims they were the biggest obstacle for Bolsonaro,
Okay.
and they outline three main areas of concern.
All right, let's hear it.
First, they allege that there was widespread censorship of Bolsonaro's allies.
Censorship. How so?
They claim that their accounts and communications were blocked.
Like social media and stuff.
Exactly, and they say the justification was pretty weak.
Like what?
Just vague accusations of attacks on democratic institutions.
Sounds a bit like silencing opposition under the guise of protecting democracy.
That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is.
And it doesn't stop there.
Oh, boy.
They also criticize
Yeah.
this judge, Alexandre de Moraes,
Okay.
who was at the STF.
For using what they call monocratic decisions.
Monocratic decisions? What does that even mean?
So imagine
Yeah.
a single judge
Right.
issuing these really impactful orders
Right.
that affect like freedom of expression and political rights,
Wow.
and often without a full vote from the court.
So basically, one person making huge decisions.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I could see why that would raise some eyebrows.
Definitely.
And what was the third concern?
Oh, right. So the source also points to a bunch of legal decisions that seem designed to prevent Bolsonaro from running for office again.
In 2026.
Yep. They see it as a move to eliminate him from politics.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
This source is basically claiming that the institutions designed to safeguard democracy
Right.
were actually using their power to undermine a democratically elected president.
And silence his supporters.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is, and it leads to their central argument
Which is,
that the real coup wasn't actually orchestrated by Bolsonaro,
oh, wow.
but rather by those who wanted to remove him from power and prevent him from coming back.
So they're flipping the script completely.
Exactly. The whole coup narrative was a smokescreen.
Wow.
That's what they're saying.
So they're claiming this whole thing was just a cover to censor people, persecute opponents, and concentrate power within the judiciary.
Yep. They argue this narrative was used to justify actions that actually weakened freedom of expression, limited political rights,
Okay.
and messed with that whole delicate balance of power in Brazil.
Man, that's a lot to unpack.
It is.
So what's the most important takeaway for our listeners so far?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that this source is really urging us to question that dominant narrative surrounding Bolsonaro.
Okay.
They're asking us to consider the possibility that the real threat to democracy might actually be coming from unexpected places, even from those institutions that are supposed to protect it.
A pretty powerful message.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll resonate with anyone who's concerned about, the health of democracies around the world.
Absolutely.
Because it reminds us that we need to be vigilant
Right.
about all forms of power, even those that are, supposedly wielded in the name of democracy.
That's the key.
Now,
Yeah.
before we move on to part 2,
Okay.
I just want to remind everyone that this is just one perspective on a very complex situation.
Absolutely.
And there are many other viewpoints
Out there.
and interpretations of these events.
So, explore those other perspectives.
Yeah.
Form your own conclusions.
Absolutely.
Let all of us sink in a bit.
Yeah.
And we'll be back soon
With part 2.
to dive even deeper into Brazilian politics.
And what this alternative narrative might mean for the future of the country.
Can't wait.
Okay, so we've laid out the source's argument about a silent coup in Brazil.
Right. A pretty provocative claim.
It is.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the potential consequences.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, if we entertain this narrative for a moment, what does it mean for democracy?
Well, I think it raises some really fundamental questions about power and accountability.
Right.
Like, if these institutions that are supposed to safeguard freedom are potentially overstepping their boundaries, then who keeps them in check?
Like that old saying, right?
Exactly. Who watches the watchman?
It's a real catch-22.
Yeah, it is.
Because the very mechanisms that are designed to protect democracy could be used to erode it from within.
That's the scary part.
It's kind of unsettling.
I agree. It's a sobering thought for sure.
It is.
And it really highlights how important those checks and balances are.
Right.
To prevent any one institution.
Or person.
Yeah, or person from having too much power.
Without any oversight.
Exactly. And this source is suggesting that balance has been disrupted in Brazil.
So if we follow this logic, what happens next? I mean, is this silent coup an ongoing thing?
Yeah, that's exactly the concern they're raising by sidelining Bolsonaro and silencing these opposing voices.
Yeah.
They're saying these institutions are just consolidating their power.
Okay.
And they're limiting the space for genuine democratic debate.
And that could have a domino effect on future elections, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If people feel like the system is rigged
Yeah.
or that it's not transparent, then they might just lose faith in the whole thing.
Exactly. That's a dangerous path for any democracy.
It is.
It's like the slippery slope toward authoritarianism.
Okay, so then what's the solution?
Yeah, how do we push back against this?
How do citizens safeguard their democracy?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the source doesn't give us any easy answers.
Okay.
But they do emphasize a few key things.
Right.
Critical thinking.
Right.
Independent media.
Oh, yeah.
And a vibrant civil society.
So basically, we can't just be passive observers. We need to be informed.
Yes.
Engaged. And willing to hold those in power accountable.
Exact.
Regardless of their political affiliation.
It's crucial.
And not easy, but
it's necessary.
Yeah, this whole conversation makes me think of that quote by Learned Hand.
Oh, yeah, the American jurist.
Right.
What was it again?
He said, "Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it."
Wow, that's powerful.
It is.
It really gets to the core of this issue.
Yeah.
Democracy is about more than just institutions. It's about the values and actions of each individual citizen.
So it's up to all of us.
Absolutely.
To protect it.
It makes you wonder, though,
What's that?
What would it take for people in Brazil,
Yeah.
on both sides of the political spectrum,
Come together.
yeah, to come together and address these concerns constructively?
It seems like such a divided country right now.
It is, but is there any hope for bridging that divide?
That's the big question, isn't it?
To move beyond the polarization
Yeah.
and find common ground,
Based on those shared values.
like freedom of expression, the rule of law,
Right.
a genuine commitment to democratic principles.
The tall order.
It is.
But, history is full of examples of societies that have overcome
Yeah.
what seem like insurmountable divisions.
That's not impossible.
It's not impossible, and a lot of times it starts with
Yeah.
individuals,
Right.
people like our listener,
Yeah.
who are willing to question assumptions,
Uh-huh.
engage in those difficult conversations,
Yeah, respectful dialogue.
and demand better from their leaders.
And from their institutions.
Speaking of our listener,
Yeah.
I'd love to know what's going through your mind right now.
Yeah, what stands out to you?
What questions or concerns do you have?
We're all in this together, after all.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Connect with us on social media.
Or leave a comment on our website.
These conversations are so important,
They're vital for a healthy democracy.
and we want to hear your voice. Okay, so
Yeah.
before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Right.
I want to shift gears just a bit
Okay.
and bring in another dimension to this already complex story.
Sounds good.
So far, we've mainly focused on
Yeah.
the political and institutional aspects
Huh?
of this silent coup narrative.
Right.
But I think it's also important to acknowledge the social and cultural undercurrents that are at play here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
the political climate in Brazil,
Yeah.
much like many other countries around the world,
Right.
it's deeply intertwined with these social and cultural currents.
Exactly. So
Still connected?
understanding these currents
Yeah.
can really help us grasp
Right.
the motivations and anxieties
Yeah.
that are driving political behavior.
It's like trying to understand a play
Okay.
without knowing the backstory of the characters.
I like that.
Yeah.
A good analogy.
So where do we even begin to untangle all of this?
Right. It's all.
It's like a knotted ball of yarn.
Well, I think a good starting point is to look at the historical context.
Okay. Yeah.
Brazil has a long and complicated history with authoritarianism,
That's true.
and that legacy still casts a shadow.
Over its present-day politics.
It's like a ghost that's still lingering.
I like that imagery.
And the memory of the military dictatorship,
Oh, yeah.
which ended in 1985, it's still very much alive.
Yeah, for a lot of Brazilians.
It's a wound that hasn't fully healed.
Right.
And that experience has really shaped people's attitudes toward authority, freedom.
A role of the state.
Yeah, and I think it might explain why this coup narrative
Yeah,
has resonated so strongly with some people.
because they're afraid of history repeating itself.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And those fears aren't necessarily unfounded.
No, not at all.
We've seen this global trend toward democratic backsliding,
Yeah.
where authoritarian leaders,
And movements.
right, are gaining ground all over the world.
It's a worrying trend.
It is.
It is.
So the challenges that Brazilian democracy is facing,
Yeah.
they're not unique.
Nope.
They're part of a bigger global phenomenon.
Which means we need to be vigilant.
Yeah.
Not just in Brazil, but everywhere.
And that's why these conversations are so important.
They are.
We need to raise awareness, encourage critical thinking,
Yeah.
and really grapple with these complex forces.
That are shaping our world.
We can't be complacent.
Nope. Not at all.
All right, well,
Yeah.
I think we've given our listener a lot to think about.
I think it's time to pause here.
Okay,
Give everyone a chance to process all this information.
sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have
It's important to take a step back and reflect.
agreed. So we'll be back with the final part of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
We'll explore some potential solutions
Ooh.
and leave you with some thought-provoking questions
Ooh. I like it.
to ponder.
See?
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into this alternative perspective on Brazilian politics.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We've explored that silent coup narrative, the potential impact on democracy.
We even touched on those historical and social forces at play.
Right, it's a lot to process.
It is.
But I think the big question now is,
Yeah.
what can we, as engaged citizens, learn from all of this?
What are the broader takeaways? If this perspective on Brazilian politics holds any weight, I mean...
That's a great question, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexity.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think there are some valuable lessons here for all of us,
Okay.
no matter where we live.
Like what?
Well, for me, one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of staying vigilant.
Vigilance.
Yeah, democracy isn't a spectator sport. It's a participatory one.
We can't just assume that our institutions are going to function properly.
Right.
Like some well-oiled machine.
Exactly. It takes active citizenship.
Informed individuals who are willing to hold power accountable.
Makes sense. But how can everyday people actually make a difference?
I know, it can feel like
Yeah.
trying to steer a giant ship
Right.
with a tiny little rudder.
So where do we even start?
Well, I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Understanding the issues, educating ourselves about how power operates,
Yeah.
recognizing the potential for abuse,
Knowledge is power, right?
It's a good starting point.
But knowing isn't enough, is it?
No, you're right.
What about action? How do we translate awareness into meaningful action?
Well, action can take many forms, right?
Yeah.
It could be engaging in thoughtful discussions,
Okay.
supporting independent media,
Right.
participating in peaceful protests, maybe even running for office yourself.
So basically, finding ways to make your voice heard and contribute to the democratic process.
Exactly.
Go wherever you can.
It's about recognizing that we all have a stake in this.
Yeah.
Democracy is a collective responsibility.
And sometimes that means
Yeah.
taking a stand,
Speaking out,
even when it's uncomfortable.
even when it feels risky.
You're saying that staying silent is almost like giving consent.
In a way, yeah.
Wow.
When we stay silent in the face of injustice or abuse of power,
Yeah.
we become complicit.
So we have a responsibility to speak up,
We do.
to hold our leaders accountable,
Yes.
to defend those values.
That underpin a free and just society.
That's powerful.
It's important.
So what advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed by all of this or discouraged by the state of politics, not just in Brazil,
Right.
but around the world?
It can feel like a losing battle sometimes,
You can.
but don't give up hope.
Okay.
Democracy is always a work in progress.
Right.
It's going to be messy, it's going to be imperfect,
Yeah.
but it's the best system we have.
For ensuring freedom and justice.
Exactly. Human dignity.
So we have to stay engaged,
We do.
stay informed,
Yeah.
and never lose faith in the power of collective action.
Even when things look bleak.
Even when things look bleak.
Absolutely.
Because we're not alone in this.
we're not.
There are others out there who share our values.
Who are working towards a better future.
So find your tribe.
Connect with them.
Keep fighting the good fight.
That's it.
Well said.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive.
It does.
We covered a lot of ground today,
We did a controversial perspective on Brazilian politics.
and what it might mean for the rest of the world.
But as always, the conversation doesn't end here.
No, it doesn't.
We want to hear from you, our listener.
What are your thoughts?
What resonated with you?
What challenged your worldview?
Keep exploring these issues. Engage in respectful dialogue
Become an active participant in shaping the future,
of your community and your world.
because the fate of democracy rests on each and every one of us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious.
And keep those critical thinking caps on.